It felt like starting from square one again. I wasn't doing very well, I was struggling. And it didn't get any easier. And I just wanted to run. The classroom is usually my safe place, my happy place.
You actually then nearly got fired.
Unfortunately, we're gonna have to let you go.
This is Teacher Talk.
Oh, that's a nice title, isn't it?
So following on from last episode, you've left Italy. Where did you go?
Well, for the first time in God knows how long, I had no idea where I was going. So basically I'm from Manchester or near Manchester, so I just decided to stay there basically. Although I'd considered a few options, I'd considered going back to Vietnam, but it was just too far. You know, I wanted to be a lot closer to home. When I started this in 2012, I didn't have nieces and nephews, but now sort of the family was expanding and I didn't want to be that uncle that didn't know his nieces and nephews. So because I couldn't pick a country within Europe, that's where I was thinking, I just decided, okay, let's stay here until I find some clarity.
And how did it feel at this time? Did it feel like a step back?
Massively. Yeah, of course. It felt like starting from square one again.
So you're back in Manchester with family, back to where you grew up. I assume you stayed in teaching?
Yeah, I applied for a couple of jobs, a couple of schools in Manchester. This time I was working, I got jobs, I was working for two schools. So I got two interviews working for two schools in the centre of Manchester.
And how come it was two?
One of them was just in the mornings, I think from like 9 till 12:30. But that was only supposed to be a temporary thing. I was covering for a teacher, I think he was from New Zealand. He was going back to New Zealand for a couple of weeks, so I was just covering for him. The other one was in the evenings for a different school. So yeah, so I thought, well, why not? You know, I've got the time, so why not work for both of them?
And how was your day-to-day life in that time?
It was pretty mundane, pretty repetitive, very monotonous. You know, I'd get up early, go into Manchester with the first school. I'd have a big gap between the first and second, and I'd just sort of stick around, try and find something to do, somewhere to sit until the evening class, getting home late in the evening, having dinner, and then basically going to sleep, and then just doing it all over again. So Monday to Friday, week to week was, pretty monotonous.
And how was you, obviously, at that time? Because you'd come back from Italy with what had gone on, and in, like you say, a monotonous role.
It was tough. You know, at that time I was genuinely struggling, not knowing what I was doing, not being where I really wanted to be, having walked away from, as you said before, like a dream. Yeah, I wasn't doing very well. I was struggling sort of mentally at that time.
Yeah. And you mentioned, obviously, it was meant to be temporary, one of the roles?
Yep.
What happened there?
So basically the students were very happy with me. You know, I'd stepped in, it was a completely different teacher. I don't know what his teaching style was like, but the students preferred mine. And this is the first and probably only time that this has been recognised. When quite often what schools do is they tend to favour the long-term teachers, the contracted teachers. They've got some sort of strange loyalty to those sorts of teachers, whether they're good or not, whether the students like them or not. They've got this really strange loyalty. So it was the first time a school or a director of studies listened to the students. The students were happy. Keep the students happy. They're paying at the end of the day. They're the most important part of a school. They're happy with Kane. Let's keep Kane. So I ended up basically taking this guy's job.
And how did you feel about that?
If I'm being perfectly honest, the way my mental state was, I didn't really think about it. I was just happy to be in a classroom. The students were happy with me. That's sometimes the nature of the beast. That's the ruthlessness of this industry as well.
So how was it actually teaching students, obviously back in England?
I mean, that part I really, really loved, because they're international students. They're all adults. Some of them are there for a few weeks. Some of them are there for a few months. Some of them were trying to relocate to the UK. They had jobs, part-time jobs. And I just love working as well with an international group of students, because sometimes if you're working with a single nationality, students can slip into what's referred to as the L1, which is their first language. But when you're in an international environment, they have to use what's called L2, which is their second language. So when you've got, people from Italy, Switzerland, Colombia, Brazil, Germany, when you've got this mix of people, it's really good fun. So that was one of the positives of the experience.
Oh, good. And obviously you mentioned the work was quite monotonous. What was the course books like? What was the teaching material?
New book at the time, but the school had this principle that basically once you finish the book, you start again. So because I was with these students every single day, 5 times a week, Monday to Friday, basically it was 1 unit a week. The book had 10 units. So after 10 weeks, you finish the book. Rather than start a new book, we just start again. And I think the time that I was there, I went through that book 3 times, same page 3 times, same units, and sometimes like the same games, the same jokes, the same videos, and that gets a bit tiring after the 3rd time.
So I can imagine that time being very frustrating, especially in your current mental state.
Yeah.
How were things at home?
They were, I had my own sort of personal challenges at that time, and there were other challenges within the family as well. There were other struggles that were going on outside of my own struggles. So it was just, like I said, in the previous one, it was the previous episode, it was a tough year all around. And it didn't get any easier.
Mm-hmm. And at the time, was you aware how bad it was?
I was. There was a moment, it's the first and only time it's ever actually happened in my 15-year career. I was in a classroom, I'm always there early, getting set up, getting the classroom ready. And it was like 5 minutes before students were ready to come in. And I just had this overwhelming sort of feeling of anxiety, and I just wanted to run. And that's, like I said, that for me, a classroom is usually my safe place, my happy place. So to have that feeling when I was in a classroom, that was tough.
And did you act upon that at all?
I did. I was aware of it. I did, which again is really tough. But I did have to reach out and ask for help. We all need help sometimes, and I was struggling. So, yeah. Well,
the big thing is that you asked for the help. So it's great that you could do that. Now moving on from obviously this time, what did you do after that academic year? Because I assume you stayed in Manchester the whole time.
So this was getting towards the beginning of the summer, and again I had to make a decision. Do I stay in Manchester? It was a great school. They provided me with an opportunity, trusted me, but I felt like I had to get away from Manchester, go somewhere else, because I had no clarity. I still didn't know where I was going. I knew I wanted a school. That never left. I still wanted a school, but I didn't know where. And I'd been going to Brighton now for 3 summers before that. So I just decided, okay, let's go back to Brighton. I like the school, I like the setup, I know the people, I've got friends down there. I felt maybe being in that environment might help to give me some clarity on what to do next, because I still didn't know.
And how did you find it when you got to Brighton?
It's somewhere familiar. Like I say, it's my fourth summer down there. I do enjoy going there. Enjoy going back to the school. So yeah, I did feel a little bit better for a while. Again, it's the summer. People complain about British weather, but as a rule, the weather's pretty decent, especially down there. So no, I felt good, and I felt that I was in the right place mentally to hopefully find some clarity.
And did you potentially see it as a time, a bit of reflection over the last 12 months?
Yeah, I definitely had that time, but I wasn't putting too much pressure on it either. It wasn't, okay, I have to figure this out. I just felt it was the best place for me to figure things out.
Yeah. And what did you do then? Because you say that's for the summer normally for Brighton. What happened after that?
Well, I still couldn't find any clarity, so I just thought, well, let's stick around in the winter. I know it's generally tougher because the school has a full team all year round. The summer's much busier. People travelling to the UK for the summer, much, much busier. So I knew I wouldn't have sort of like a full-time schedule over winter, but enough to kind of to get by, which I did. But there were some tough times as well, you know, because I'd just been in that situation in Manchester where the school had just given me somebody else's schedule because the students were happy. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of the opposite. You know, again, students were happy with me, but the school was still showing loyalty to these, you know, long-term teachers or fair enough teachers with contracts. But yeah, there were some times where I was basically just, you know, picking up scraps in terms of work.
So looking back, after what went on in the previous year, the back end of the previous year, how you currently was mentally, the monotonous work and the kind of year that you'd had, you actually then nearly got fired.
Yes, which sounds more serious than it is. The director of studies called me into his office, said, sorry, Kane, we need a chat. And I just knew it was very serious at that time. And I could see he was also feeling really awkward about the whole thing. And he just said, unfortunately, we're going to have to let you go. Which I was like, well, why? You know, like, I've not done anything. I hadn't done anything. You know, students were generally very happy with me. Basically, on their website, they advertise that they have teachers with the minimum of a CELTA, which is a certificate in English language training for adults. It's kind of like, you know, it's the first, I'd say, big step in any sort of certification for teaching English as a foreign language. I didn't have it. But he also knew this because he'd hired me for 4 consecutive summers and kept me around during the winter. So he knew this, but because the marketing team had spoken to him and said, well, he's not got a CELTA, we're advertising that all our teachers have a minimum CELTA, therefore we cannot keep him. So that's why he felt so uncomfortable, because he realised that he'd made the mistake, not me.
You're just going back a second, obviously, you mentioned CELTA's like the first teaching qualification. You had a TEFL. What's the difference?
So a TEFL is certainly a great step into the industry. Most of the TEFLs are online, very theoretical. The CELTA provides a lot more teaching practice with sort of qualified teachers, because the CELTA that I did, it was that I ended up doing is 10 weeks. So you have a lot of teaching practice, a lot of feedback, you have to do assignments. So it's a lot more intense of a course. So I'd say it's, you know, TEFL is a great stepping stone, but CELTA's probably the big one, which just gives you more opportunities, and it opens a lot more doors for schools, because a lot of schools, like the one that I was working for, promote themselves as only hiring teachers with that qualification. So it opens up a lot more doors.
Well, obviously it's quite devastating, like you say, considering you've been there multiple years. Assumed again it was a safe environment in that sense, and everything was secure.
It just felt like another knockback.
Well, yeah, especially again after the year you've had. So what actually happened? How did that you overcome that? What?
I said that he was great. You know, he was for me, he was a really great manager. We just had a conversation, because he just asked me, well, why don't you have it? Because he said, like, to be honest, he said, given your experience, I think I've been teaching, what, 6 or 7 years now? I'm 6 or 7 years in. He'd seen me teach, obviously, for 4 summers. So he knew, he said, like, you'd easily be able to do it. It still takes time. But why haven't you done it? And I just said, well, one of 2 reasons. Either haven't had the time, because I've been working full time, or didn't have the money. So that was basically it. It's not because I didn't want to do it.
So what happened?
We had a conversation, and he actually suggested that I do what's called the Delta, which is a diploma in English language training for adults, which is basically equivalent to a degree. And for me, that was a very exciting prospect. And apparently, in order to do the Delta, you first have to complete a CELTA, as far as I'm aware. But he said, you know, because he's an academic manager of a school, so he said he could kind of put a good word in for me to say that he feels that I would easily be able to do a CELTA, so therefore sort of push me and just get me in to do a Delta. which takes a year. So it's a big commitment. But considering I still didn't know what I was doing or where I was going, I was quite excited by the idea, because they were going to help pay for it, not all of it, but they were going to provide, I think maybe half. I think they were going to pay for half of the course, provide me with work so that I can maintain a life down there, and guide me through the Delta, which takes a year. So, yeah, at this point, I was after a tough year, I felt, okay, now there was another goal, there was another target, so it felt really good.
So what happened? Did you go and get it done?
Well, this was February 2020.
Okay.
Which, if anybody remembers, around that time, I think a few weeks after that conversation, it was COVID-19 and the country went into lockdown. Well, the whole world went into lockdown, which just felt like bad timing.
No, definitely. Mm-hmm. So what happened to your job?
Well, basically the school, not long after, closed. It went into liquidation. Yeah. They hadn't prepared fast enough. They didn't have anything set up online to move the students online. Plus, I mean, everybody will remember that time of year. There was uncertainty for everybody, for every kind of sector, all over the world. It was unprecedented, which was the word used at the time. And the industry that I'm in really struggled at that time. Schools were closing left, right, and centre. So, you know, after a tough year, there was finally light at the end of the tunnel. And then all of a sudden that was gone as well. And there was no job, no sighting end to know when I'm going to get another teaching job. So yeah, everything just stopped.
So after the year that you'd had, how was you feeling now?
To be honest, I was feeling much better. You know, it'd been almost 18 months since the relationship had ended. I was now in a much better place where I felt like I was moving on. So yeah, mentally I felt better. I had some kind of goal, some kind of direction. I think that fire in my belly again was back. But then, you know, when COVID happened, but I wasn't sitting around feeling sorry for myself because nobody knew what was going on. So it didn't feel like it happened to me. So yeah, it was a mad roller coaster basically, of lows, highs, lows again. But as I said, this happened to everybody, not just me.
So you'd lost your job. Mm-hmm. The world had gone into lockdown.
Yeah.
Did you stay in Brighton? Did you go back to Manchester? What did you do?
Yeah, I stayed. I mean, we couldn't really travel and we didn't really know what was happening at the time. The flatmates that I had, I couldn't ask for better flatmates. They were the best people to go through lockdown with. Just did what everybody else did. We're baking bread.
Again, a terrible time, but how you've just summarised COVID in my flat with my flatmates baking bread.
But that's not even true, because to be honest, I think I was one of the few people that didn't bake any bread. I was just trying to keep myself busy like everybody day to day. My flatmates were still working at that time. I wasn't working, but I didn't want to do nothing. So I would divide my days between, today I'm going to go for a run, the day after I'm going to do some sort of home exercise that everybody was doing. I'd go for a run, I'll go for a walk, try and learn something new, and just try to go through it day by day, basically.
So after the previous 18 months that you had, again, it was like a constant going further down and down,
yeah.
Sorry to say. And then COVID hits. It does seem like you're back at square one.
Yeah, but it was during that time I mentioned that I was trying to look for where is next, trying to find some sort of inspiration. At least over the next couple of months of lockdown, I was able to finally decide where I wanted to go next.
After the toughest year of his life, Kane is searching for a fresh start. If you're not subscribed yet, Make sure you are, because next time a new chapter begins.